Hi, I'm Tommy Linstroth, and I beat the often path by automating sustainability for the construction industry.
Why should every building be green? Well, not in color, but you know what I mean. Buildings, both commercial and residential, account for about 40% of annual CO2 emissions. It's an enormously wasteful industry ripe for innovation, but how do we bring about this new era of eco-buildings? Well, my guest today is Tommy Linstroth, the CEO of Green Badger, an SaaS platform for automating sustainability. They make it much easier for construction professionals to build sustainably. It's a clever approach to an important sector that we don't often think about. Oh, and these buildings can dramatically lower your monthly energy costs as well, so you'll benefit individually. It's an incredibly cool concept. Joining us now is Tommy Linstroth, CEO of Green Badger. I'm Ross Palmer, and this is Beat the Often Path. Welcome to the show, Tommy. I wanted to say I came across your profile because I was trying to find something for my IAQ and ESC meeting, for my OAC to get LEED certification to meet my ESG goals. Those all mean things, right?
I think you left a couple acronyms out there, but we can probably make some up here.
VOC. I gotta make sure my VOC products are scanned. So what are we talking about here? What are all these acronyms?
All these acronyms are various sustainability components of the built environment, or very specific to the construction industry as they're trying to incorporate sustainability. So they all reference either product attributes or types of inspections or types of best practices that the construction industry should be considering or are actually implementing throughout the course of building a house, building a building, building an airport, whatever they might be working on.
Well, we say the word should, but wouldn't it be better if they just ignored all of that and just did nothing or did things the way they've always been doing them?
Yes, exactly. You should never progress, never move forward, and never change your practices. Sit on your hands, and ignorance is bliss, right? Life is good.
That's the American dream.
And we're off to the races.
Everything we've ever done was perfect up until now. Everything we have as an idea that's now is worse. That's my general philosophy in life. I'm sure you share that belief, though.
Unfortunately, that doesn't work for my business model here. So I need things to change.
Right.
And in fact, the more they change, the better it is for me.
Okay. So what is the problem? What's going on? Because construction, we have a dim understanding that it's a very wasteful place. A lot of stuff. It's a black hole sometimes. So how did you end up in this particular niche, as it's called, and why did you make this particular product?
Sure. So construction's it's interesting, and it's I've seen it firsthand for a number of years. A lot of times you drive by a construction project and you see a big fence go up, and you don't really see what's going on behind the scenes until at the end of the day there's a big building and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool." I actually came into it
yelled at by people with hard hats from sometimes. Hey,
exactly. Hard hat vest. Most often your experience is them holding a stop or a slow sign as they're having a train coming across the road, and you're just like, I'm just trying to get to the grocery store,
man. Trying to get to work.
Yeah. I actually came into it from the opposite side. I actually started my career in real estate development. So I worked for a development company here in Savannah that did commercial projects throughout the Southeast. We did all sorts of fun stuff being in Savannah, like historical preservation projects, but we also did affordable housing. We did shopping centers. We built McDonald's, office building, really ran the gamut. And the interesting thing for us was that we had committed that we were going to do that all as sustainably as possible. We wanted those buildings to be green. The company felt that way just as an ethos, but we also thought it was a very strong business case. It made us have unique products on the market. They were cheaper to operate. They had lower operating costs. And frankly, you had a lot of progressive brands that found that very attractive. So it actually could make those spaces easier to lease. So I lived really on the owner side where we could dictate what we wanted. We wanted these materials. We wanted these products. We wanted things done this way. And people kind of looked at us crazy back then. That was almost 20 years ago. And certainly in the Southeast, people are like, "You're building green? What did you do wrong? Like, why are they making you do this? You must have really screwed something else up in the past."
Yeah, that's part of your punishment, your community service for a greater crime committed at an earlier date.
Yeah, but fortunately for me, I was the director of sustainability. I've had sustainability really in my bones for a long time. And
you're talking about 20 years ago?
That was 20 years ago, but it started, I think when I
didn't
first
even know they had that title then.
They didn't. Well, that was one of the first. Back, like my degree was in environmental studies. You didn't hear the word sustainability until it became a buzzword a little bit later. But for us, I mean,
That's
it meant the same
impressive.
thing, right? It was making money, but you can do it while doing things that are good for your community and good for the planet.
And there's a few things that I think are very interesting about this: a practical side of this industry, and let's say the more preachy side. And I think there are two sort of factions that are happening at the same time. And that's an interesting point. Like on the one hand, if I purchase an apartment, you've made sustainable apartment buildings, a small or a Fellwood, sustainable Fellwood and sustainable Fellwood too. If I get an apartment, of course, I like the idea of having lower energy costs because it's more efficient, or the heating is better, the cooling is better, it's solar powered. There's a lot of advantages on a practical level. We don't like people yelling at us and telling us what to do. And we're in this interesting place, I think, politically and also with just the world, where some people feel very put off by being yelled at about some of these issues like climate change, and they get very bothered by people who bring it up. But on the other hand, there are certain practical aspects of this that everybody seems to appreciate, and that does seem to be, to me, very popular. Have you experienced that? And like you said, when you put your money where your mouth is, you see things a little differently. So what have you experienced in terms of pushback or embracing of these concepts in your career?
It's like you just said. It's one of those things. Do you want to have an inefficient, unhealthy building? Is that where you want to live? Right? No, doesn't make any sense, right? Call it green, call it efficient, whatever you want. To me, a lot of it's about the messaging. And I'm a firm believer in climate change, and I think I've spent a lot of time on it. But if you don't, I'm not going to change your mind. I mean, that's the thing, right? It is politicized. Right. You're either one side or the other. So you can yell at me and I can yell at you, or we can change the frame of it. And it's, to me, I did that a long time ago, and I didn't want to argue about it, but I could tell you that, look, do you want to have your lower utility bills? Do you want to save money? Do you want to be in a high performance healthy building or a low performance unhealthy building? Do you want healthy air quality? Like, when you frame it like that, I mean, I don't care. All of those will result in lower greenhouse gas emissions, but it's also going to give you these other things that you will appreciate and benefit. And who cares if I'm wrong and it's not and climate change isn't an issue, but you still have a healthier building and are spending less? That's still a good thing, right? Like, hopefully, maybe that's what it takes. I don't know.
Well, I'm more and more inclined to agree with you, because the internet has shown us that those arguments are meaningless, and that they can go on forever. You can type and type and type on Instagram, on Twitter, and you're not really getting anything done at the end of the day. But I think the way you've done it is a much smarter approach. Okay, so you get into this line of work, you recognize these problems through extensive study, you've been on the investment side, and then you decide to build this building. But again, it's we threw out a bunch of acronyms. Again, we should probably shed some light on what some of those things mean, like IAQ, ESC meetings, all of that. But what was then your thought of, okay, people are trying to become compliant, but they don't know how to become compliant. What is this LEED certification? Where did that come from? And how did you recognize your specific path in this? Because to me, it's very narrow. I get it when I see it, but it's just so narrow that it's hard to imagine that somebody's just sitting there flipping through a book and saying, that's what I want to do with my life.
Sure. Well, after doing it for the development company, and we use LEED, which is an acronym. It is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And it is a third-party certification from a group called the U.S. Green Building Council. And so it allowed us as a developer to say, look, we're not just telling you it's green because we put in one good light bulb. Like, we actually have a third-party verification, like JD Power for your car, right? You want to see that stamp that your car is safe and all this good stuff. LEED basically does that for a building so that we can communicate to the market that we actually did these practices. And so we use that as our benchmark. It's actually widely used. Almost any publicly funded building, any federally funded building requires it. 2/3 of states require it. 95% of Fortune 100 companies require it. So the industry has basically adopted this as their check mark for their buildings. And so it's built an industry around it. And so I moved from development into being a consultant and helping others implement these standards. And what we found is it was a lot like, after you get through the initial slug, there's a lot of accounting basically, and you become an accountant, and you're tracking. You got a box of receipts from your construction over 3 years, and then you've got to fill out your 1040 for your taxes just right and hope that you don't get audited. So LEED certification is sort of the same way. You've got to track all of these processes and practices that go on at these crazy job sites for years, and then hope that you don't screw something up. Because if you don't, by that point, it's a contractual obligation, and then you get sued and litigated damages. So there's some consequences for screwing up.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Everybody, myself included, was doing this by hand in these big, crazy spreadsheets, and it's like, my God, the opportunity for error was just so huge. And so really, I just started looking for a solution for myself in the 15 or 20 projects I was working on, and there wasn't one. And so then I started looking at, well, what could we do to try and make this process easier, that we could do it while I'm at a job site, just so that you can know, is this can of paint healthy or not healthy? You can scan the barcode. So we actually built a little prototype that you could just scan a barcode on a can of paint and it would say yes or no. And once we had that, it's like, my goodness, if we can do this, we can manage IAQ, which is indoor air quality. We can manage all of the materials. We can manage ESC, which is erosion control, the orange fence you see around the perimeter of a job site. And we can take away these clipboards, these manual inspections, these massive spreadsheets that get tracked for years. Our software is being used on LaGuardia, which has started,
No way.
almost 8 years ago, right? And it's going for another like 3 more years. And can you imagine tracking 10 years of construction in a spreadsheet after hundreds of people have came and joined that project and left that project? And, it's just a nightmare. And so
that sounds like the worst thing I can possibly comprehend.
Right. So we built what is basically a TurboTax for LEED certification. It's just one central platform that was a very acute headache that I had, that I was living in, and I wanted that headache to go away. And there was no Advil for it. And so pivoted from consulting once I had the prototype and said, look, I'm on 20 projects a year. We could be on 2,000 projects, 20,000 projects. Like, let's get this to the industry, because as I mentioned, like for the contractor, the construction community, this is not optional at this point. Like, if they get a project that has this, it's in their document, it's in their contract, they've got to do it. And they can either spend hundreds of hours tracking all this stuff in spreadsheets, or they can use a software solution to try and automate it. And so really that's where we found our sweet spot of this is a headache that a lot of people have.
That's brilliant. What are at a high level, what are some of the most important things to make a building become LEED certified? What are some of the most critical components there?
So LEED is good because, back when I was starting out, the only thing I ever thought about was energy efficiency. And that's a huge component of this, but it makes you think of other things like, how are you siting the building? Like, where is it? Does it have access to transit? Does it have, ability to infiltrate stormwater on site, or are you just schlepping it all off into the drain? So, it really makes you look at site constraints. It makes you look at the water efficiency of the building, how much irrigation, if any, is required. Certainly the energy is a big component. Really where we live pretty heavily is the material selection. And you're putting a material in place that's going to be there for 50 or 100 years. Like, are you picking the right one? Are you picking the one that's not going to off-gas toxins into the employees for the next year? And then finally, the indoor air quality. Again, are you going to provide them with proper ventilation, especially, coming out of COVID now, it's a big thing of making sure these unventilated buildings can get fresh air in and disperse things in a way. My first job out of college, when I took before I pivoted, I was in a 1-story cinder block building. I shared an office. I had no windows. The acoustics were terrible. I was staring at a cork board and my weird little iMac at the time. It was the colored iMacs is what we had, with the mouse that didn't have buttons and
that's
sucked.
Awesome.
And I was like, God, I dreaded coming to work, and then you go somewhere where you've got windows and fresh air and you don't hear everything. And it's like, when you look at one of the big things they talk about in green building, it's productivity, and saving money on your electric bill is good, but your number one expense of a company is your people. And if they're even a tiny bit more efficient at work, like, that return is humongous. And I can tell just from my own experience, like, when I walked in there, I went from smiling to like, oh my God, here I am again in this office with no windows. I mean, it could have been storming out. I would have had no idea, right? It's like, it was sunny when I went in, it was dark when I came out, and whatever happened in between. And so it gave me very firsthand experience to really say that, yes, I mean, I can tell you there's crap work environments and there's good ones. And, if you have a good, healthy one, it should make you more, just even that little tiny bit better at your job, or you're taking one less sick day because you just dread going in there. And, that is going to have a positive impact on the bottom line.
Well, I think it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. So I guess I'll leave it to you for some parting wisdom here. Any general parting wisdom? The floor is yours.
Any general parting wisdom, man? My kids would tell you I've got none. At least
maybe we should get your kids on.
At least from their perspective. But I don't know. My parting wisdom is follow your passion and find those opportunities, because they might not exist for everybody, but I think if you look hard enough, you can align those two. And for for me, from what I see, if you can find that alignment, it just makes, you don't want going to work to just be work, right? If you can go to work and it's something you believe in, that's going to set you up for a much better balance in life. So I'd say look for those opportunities, align yourselves with organizations you believe in, and you'll probably have a better 9 to 5 every day.
That's right. Or at the very least, you can improve your IAQ, your OAC, and you can make sure that you're compliant with ESC standards. And you can
LOL.
only choose to live in an LEED certified building, which now we know what all of that means. So it's been an absolute pleasure, sir. I very much appreciate you taking the time. And where can they find you, by the way? Where can they find and support your mission?
Best place to go is getgreenbadger.com, and you can find Green Badger on all the usual socials.
Alrighty, sounds good. And with that, the official podcast is over.